What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast. I apologize for starting this up a little bit later, but regardless, we are live right now and we have a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, some bad news as well as a lot of the good, because the good is the fact that the Mets are arriving in Florida right now. Pretty much everyone is there now. And then on top of that, we got the first spring training game coming up this weekend. And then the bad news is, of course, the injury that we have to talk about. Before we jump into all of it, leave a like on your way into the live stream. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get an audio version up with this podcast, but if I do, then give a rating, give a review. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If again, I end up putting the audio version out, but we're also going to get into our batting orders in this live stream. So we got a lot to unpack here. But Matt, how we feeling as the first spring training game is this Saturday, right? Saturday.
Yeah, this Saturday, and Clay Holmes is going to be the first starter. So exciting times, exciting times. Obviously, it's great to see all the guys arriving down in Port St. Lucie. Soto, Lindor, Manaya, Sanga, Nimmo, Pete, obviously coming back. It's good to see. Obviously, like you said, some bad news of Frankie Montas going down, an unfortunate injury. Will the Mets now? Who will they be switching to in terms of who they get to replace Montas? Is it going to be a cheaper signing? Are they going to maybe look to make a trade? Maybe does Brandon Sproat impress in spring training? He makes his way onto the opening day roster, even though I have my doubts about that, just because I think Stearns wants to keep him down there in AAA and let him marinate a little bit longer. But we'll see. That's why we play spring training, and we'll get a bunch of answers to our questions. But before we get into it, I gotta congratulate a couple guys because first of all, because we haven't done a podcast, especially with me, in a while because I missed the last one. Congratulations to former Met Billy Wagner on getting inducted into the Hall of Fame on his final ballot,
Yes.
and congratulations to David Wright on getting his number retired this year. It's a great honor, and even though I would hope that David Wright could somehow maybe make it to the Hall of Fame, even though I don't think it's going to happen just because the injuries killed his career, but nonetheless, deserved to get his number retired, and hopefully, we'll be in attendance for that game to see his number 5 go up into the rafters.
Yeah, just need the ticket prices to freaking drop. But yeah, I forgot to mention that. Honestly have forgot a couple things throughout the last podcast episodes. Truthfully, like Nick Madrigal is a signing that we'll talk about in relation to another topic. And then on top of that, I did forget to bring up that they signed Aber Azalai. I think I'm saying his name right, to a 2-year deal, minor league deal, for both years, even though he's probably not going to pitch this year. But in terms of just that signing, to give my brief thoughts, and I'll let you go before we get into like the big topics here. Just to give my thoughts there, I'm very happy with that signing. That's an arm that I thought was intriguing going into the offseason. Had Tommy John surgery, unfortunately. Hopefully, when he comes back, he could get anything to what he was when he, before he got injured. If you could get anything of what he was, you have a really good arm in the bullpen all of a sudden. So, your thoughts on that before we get into the heavy hitting topics?
Really not much. I mean, you pretty much covered it all. I mean, he's an exciting arm. He's got some decent stuff in his repertoire with slider, sinker, four seamer, cutter, changeup, 42-degree arm angle. Yeah, obviously he's gonna miss most of this year of all this year because of what did he get, Tommy John surgery?
Yeah, Tommy
Yeah,
John.
Tommy John surgery. So hopefully, we'll see him back either late this year or possibly next year, and that's another arm, another decent arm that's going to be in this bullpen. Like I said, whether it's later this year or next year. But yeah, other than that, I don't got anything else to add on that.
Yeah, the great part about him getting him back would be that this bullpen would have something that I think every Met fan would be extremely horned up about, and that is he does not walk a lot of batters. That's something that I like about him. Generates a lot of swing and miss stuff, but we're not going to bore you guys with that. We're going to talk about the heavy hitting topics now. Frankie Montas will mix 6 to 8 weeks with a lat injury, and it sucks because sitting here right now, and it is a little bit of revisionist history. I'll admit it. But sitting here right now and thinking about the fact that there were so many other options that signed in a similar price range to where it was less risky, I'm a little upset. And this is where though David Stearns will face criticism if this continues to go in this trend in terms of the injuries, because the biggest risk, and granted, I will say this though, the risk with signing Severino last year was the injuries. This Montas signing, we said if he's healthy, fantastic signing, because you're going to get innings, you're going to get solid starts from the back end of your rotation. But the catch to it was this exactly. And the thing that really sucks is he did it without even picking up a baseball. I don't know how the hell it even happened, but either way, he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. So if we're doing the math here on this one, he's probably not going to be, and that's to begin throwing. So he's probably not going to begin throwing until late March, early April, at the earliest. And even then, maybe it's, the second week of April. Then you're talking about him needing to ramp up, and it's going to be, another month, another 2 months. I should say 2 months, closer to that, of ramping up and getting into game shape. It's unfortunate. This was the risk. At the same time, it's hard to play too much revisionist history, because when the signing happened, we both agreed, I think, that okay, it worked with Severino, and Montas proved that he was healthy last year. He's proven he could pitch in New York. Let's see how it unfolds this season and give Stearns the benefit of the doubt. But early on, this is the first time that we might have to give him a little bit of criticism if this is the trend here where he's going to miss a lot of time and be injured a lot. I can tell you right now, though, the Mets are definitely going to get a year at half of him, because there's no way he's opting out now after getting hurt unless he pitches like Jacob DeGrom post injury. But what are your thoughts on the injury, of course, which absolutely sucks?
I think it's just more unfortunate, really than anything else, because I think me and you, we weren't excited about Frankie Montas, but I think we were a bit intrigued just because of the stuff that he showed in Oakland. He showed that he could pitch as a 2 or maybe a 3 type of pitcher, which is a pretty good arm in your rotation. And I mean, I think he made a couple starts in the playoffs, at least when Oakland was at least decent back a couple years ago when he was still there. He had that trade over to the Yankees, and it really didn't work out. One, injuries, and then two, he just didn't fit well with the Yankees over there and their pitching lab and their pitching coaches. So moved on to Cincinnati. You saw a bit of improvement, and then last year when he went to Milwaukee, and you saw a more steadily improvement as he finished the year and into the playoffs. But I think it's just more unfortunate because I mean, look, I get it. There was an injury risk with signing him, but I mean, like what Carson says, and good friend of the show, Carson. Of course, make sure you guys go check out Mets Weekly whenever you do. They just put out a new episode yesterday. Um, but like we were saying, pitching now these days, it's so random.
Yep.
I mean, like we talk about like bullpen hours being up and down in year to year, but starting pitchers and injuries, it's just you never know these days. And this is why, like we've seen Stearns not go out this year and give Corbin Burns a big deal like that. Now I know he ended up signing a decent deal in Arizona, but I mean they still committed 6 years to it, and it was still a decent amount of money. But this is why now with the increased velo, you know, and also like I said, increased velo. Now the pitching clock, so now you have to pitch a bit more faster. You put more stress in your arm. This is just how it is in modern day Major League Baseball. This is why we're not seeing guys like back in the '60s, like Bob Gibson and Tom Seaver, go out there and have like 10, 15 complete games throughout a whole season. Like that just doesn't happen anymore. And that's why we see, teams baby pitchers now in terms of, inning limits and pitch counts and all that stuff. So like I said, there was risk. I think Stearns does have to take some accountability here, but like I said, and I don't want to sound like too much of an ass, but it could have been worse. It could have been Senga going down again. It could have been Manai going down. And again,
I was about to get into that.
Not that I wanted Frankie Montas to get hurt, but it could have been a lot worse, per se, as for the Mets. So listen, it's a blow. He probably won't be like, I mean, like you said, 6 to 8 weeks, and that's just like simple recovery. So the fact then you factor in that he's got to come back down, pitch in the minors, ramp up again. So we probably won't see him again till late May, early July, and that's probably being generous. Or maybe not being generous, but that's probably what I think we'll see him at that point.
Yeah, um that's the thing that I was about to get into, that, you know, it's become a tradition, let's face it here, that a Mets starter gets injured every single year during spring training because Tyler McGill has to get his spot in the rotation. It's just a tradition like none other. Where, I mean, even before Tyler McGill, go back and you could find a starting pitcher that gets hurt on the Mets. If we were to have to, obviously you pick for no injuries, but if we were to have to pick someone from this rotation to get hurt, Montas would be one of the guys where it's like, I guess him, like, it wouldn't be the worst thing. The problem really for me right now is just looking at some of these other starters that signed. Like Nick Pivetta is the one that really hurts me, where I would prefer Nick Pivetta and he signed for less than Montas. But like I said before, you can't play too much revisionist history because the Mets needed to get a starting pitcher. They needed to build a rotation. They figured they'd jump on the market. So it's hard to get too mad there, but this is also why you do not see, and you will not see, I will make the claim here, it's because it's obvious. This is why the Mets will never commit, as long as Stearns is at the helm, they will not commit long-term years and money to a starting pitcher unless they are guys like Sasaki, which I know he couldn't get a lot of money, but if it was like, if he was in the same position as Yamamoto, let's just say, where he could have got all the money, that would have changed things, because you're not going to see them sign a starting pitcher who is over 30 years old to a long-term deal. The only exception that I could maybe see is if a guy like Garrett Cole hits the market again, where, it's a guy that's proven over the past few years he's going to start every fifth day, and he's proven to be healthy, which, again, an injury could come up here and there either way, but at least he's proven for the most part to be healthy. Or maybe like Dylan Cease next offseason, who has proven to be healthy. Maybe I'm wrong with that and they just don't go long term with anyone. But this is why for all the fans that are like, they need to get an ace, they need to get someone long term, you're not going to see it because of this. And I get Montas isn't that guy, but imagine they signed a guy like Corbin Burns this offseason, and imagine he was the one that got hurt here. We'd be losing our damn minds. Imagine Blake Snell they signed and it was him that got hurt. We'd be losing our minds.
Yeah, and that's why, like, when we talk about like starting pitching additions, and I know like there's still time. Obviously, the Mets could make an addition here, late into the offseason and early spring training. But that's why we mentioned, like, when you look at, and especially at the trade deadline, like who they could potentially target. I mean, like, we've heard it for a couple weeks now that they were sniffing around the Padres and looking at a guy like Michael King and Dylan Cease, and that's why, for me personally, I would make that move just because when you sign Juan Soto to a 15-year deal, you have to make every year count. You don't want to waste any years of those deals. And I know he's still early. He's not even in his prime yet, because prime years I consider like 27 to like 32, 33. So like I said, he's 26. So for me, he's still not even in his prime. But you don't want to waste any years of those of that contract, especially like with guys like Lindor being hurt. Manai's on a short-term deal. You have Pete now. You have Pete now here for another year. You really want to take advantage. And especially like the Dodgers are not going anywhere. They're going to keep strengthening. So you got to go punch for punch with them. And for me, I would personally make that trade for Michael King and Dylan Cease, depending on what the package was, because obviously now I don't think the Padres. I mean, they could look to move because they brung in Nick Pivetta, so that's another starter they brung in. But now if you're the Padres, you look at the Mets and you see Frankie Montas going down, and now you look at the rotation and you have Paul Blackburn and Griffin Canning lining up as your 5 and 6 starters. You know, the Padres could view the Mets as a bit of a desperate team. And now you hold them over a barrel a little bit, and you hold David Stearns over a barrel a little bit. And now you could, ask for a little bit more prospects, or even like more in quantity or maybe even more quality depending on who they really want. I mean, listen, if they really want, they could ask for Brandon Sproat because at the end of the day, Cease and King, that's their players, and they don't have to trade them right now. But also the part of that is because Cease and King are both 30 years old. I think Cease, when he hits free agency, is going to be 30 years old. Michael King's going to be 31 years old when he hits free agency. Do the Mets now want to, and David Stearns, do they want to throw in a prospect like Brandon Sproat or maybe even Jet Williams to that point? And then you only have him for 1 year. And then, we talk about it. Stearns doesn't want to allocate years and big money to starting pitchers in their 30s who hit free agency. Well, then, if you don't capitalize on this year, now you lose Cease or King to free agency and you lose that top prospect to the San Diego Padres. So it's interesting what they're going to do. I don't think they're going to make that big time trade as of right now. I think they'll probably look at the more smaller signings, maybe a guy like Spencer Turnbull. I know we've heard Jose Quintana's name being thrown
Well,
out
we're about
there.
to get into that in a bit.
And listen, Jose, I appreciate your starts in the playoffs, especially game 3 in the wild card. You really held it down there, and game 4 against the Phillies and the NLDS, you really kept the Mets in that game. Me personally, I don't have any interest in bringing back Jose Quintana, but that's just me.
Well, that will answer the next topic when we get to that because I was actually going to bring that up. But yeah, the thing is, I would love for them to make that move now, especially because the whole thing that we talked about all offseason is we loved how much depth they were acquiring. Where Brandon Sproat, it didn't feel like it was a position where, he has to be so relied on to be the next guy up. Now, when you look at it, if there's one more injury, he's the next guy up because right now, I would say the rotation, you have Manaea, Senga, Holmes, Peterson, Canning, and Miguel. And I didn't say Blackburn because of the fact that I don't think he's going to be ready. I mean, he had a back injury, spinal fluid, whatever it is. I don't know if he's going to be back and ready to go come opening day. I could be wrong there, but it just sounds like an injury that you don't come back from too quickly. But if that's the case where he's not ready to go and Montas is obviously hurt now Sproat's the next guy up because outside of that, I mean, who are you looking at? Jose Budo to come back into the rotation? They already said they don't want him starting games. Outside of that, you have a couple of guys they signed like Waddell and what was the other guy's name? Hageman or whatever his name
Yeah,
was.
something like that.
Whatever his name was. I mean, those are the only other guys you're looking at. Outside of that, Sproat, and you know what? Maybe we're wrong, and maybe it's better for him to have a clear lane to where he could say, you know what, I'm just going to take this opportunity and run with it. But it could also be the opposite, where it's like I'm clearly the next guy in line with the injuries that could happen to this team, and that's the thing that does worry me, to be honest with you. With it being Montas, though, is that this is where it's like a double-edged sword because I don't want it to be Senga, obviously, but now we have the fear to begin with right now about Kodai Senga still, who does have an injury history. What if he goes down? Like, it's just for what I felt like was a respectable rotation and, one that people weren't giving enough credit to. Like, I thought the rotation wasn't anything elite, but I thought the rotation was solid. It worries me now where they're truly one injury away now from it being like a complete shit show. And that being if it's one of the top guys, because obviously if it's like Blackburn or who misses more time or like Canning or Miguel, you could get by with that. But if God forbid it's Manaea, Senga, or even Holmes or Peterson, you are completely screwed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk. I mean, when you look at the whole rotation, I mean, you got Manaea, obviously. Well, Manaea and Sanger are the quote unquote co-aces of the staff because I don't think you can really say there's a one clear ace. But Manaea, I think you can trust on. Maybe he doesn't give exactly what he showed at the end of last year. I think he could, but I still think that even like if he's not what he was last year towards the end of the year, he'll still give you solid innings and he'll still give you solid numbers. Senga, there obviously is a risk because he spent all of last year, aside from the one game against Atlanta, and then the 2 appearances that he made there in the playoffs, or the 3 because he came in game 6 for garbage innings. But the one thing I'll say about Senga though is there is injury concern, but I'm more relieved that it's not anything major in the arm. Like it's not elbow. I know he had well, he had a bicep problem. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, or it was a
Tricep.
was something, yeah, tricep. So, but again, tricep, that's not really anything major like that requires Tommy John surgery, but there is still a risk there. And obviously, then you look at Peterson, like okay, he showed some quality last year, but he also showed some up and downs. And we know a David Peterson that from year to year he's Jekyll and Hyde. You could get a decent David Peterson, or you could get a David Peterson that's completely ass, and he's getting tanked off of
I just think
every
of the
single
blue
game.
circles.
Yeah, and then like I said, Clay Holmes. Even though we both think that Clay Holmes is going to be a decent starter for this year, and he's one of the guys that I'm really looking forward to watching his spring training, especially with the implementation of a changeup and a fastball to his arsenal. But there is still a risk with Clay Holmes. Can he make that transition to a starter? We'll see. And then of course Montas, and then Blackburn, McGill, Canning. There's obviously risk with them as well. So while, like you said, I think we stated that we think that while this rotation isn't elite, there was certainly a lot of upside and it was a decent rotation. And if you just kept them in line and pitched well until the trade deadline, then you could really go out and get that big time arm in an acquisition. Or you could call up Brandon Sproat midseason and let's see what he can do. Or you could put him in the bullpen and then see what he can do there. But now it really forces the Mets to be like, where do we go now? Do we want to force Brandon Sproat up and make him pitch, and be on the opening day roster, and and make him throw a ton of innings on his arm? I don't think they want to do that, but if it comes to that, then, and if they need arms, then sometimes you got to be desperate and you got to do things that you don't like, or like we mentioned. Do they go out there, and which is probably what I think they'll most likely do? They'll go out there and sign one of the cheaper arms that's left on the free agent market.
Yeah, I lean towards that as well, where, they'll just go in that direction if, heaven forbid, there's another injury. But that's really that's really the issue, is just that there is so much uncertainty. And, last year it worked for them. This year, that's one thing that a lot of fans, including myself and even you, have said at times where, you know, I like the creativity. It's intriguing, but it did worry me trying to go the route of uncertainty for a second straight year. And, right now it's not looking great early, but, that could change if Clay Holmes works out and, Sean Manaea continues to thrive. So we'll see where that goes. But the guy that I do think is the most interesting in all of the starting pitching depth, honestly, is Waddell, just because of the fact that he went over to the KBO and really thrived there, changed himself as a pitcher. So maybe there is something a little bit more to him than we're giving credit for, and that'd be unbelievable. Stearns, I mean, that would turn the entire tide there on the Stearns talk, where imagine Waddell just comes in and is all of a sudden some great starting pitcher for this team. But we'll see where things go. It just does suck that we're in the spot. But we'll shift over to, like I was mentioning before, Jose Quintana, interested in a reunion with the New York Mets. I'm not sure if the Mets feel the same, but either way, in terms of the numbers last year, 3.75 ERA with a 4.56 FIP, a 1.25 WHIP, and that is with a 10-10 record for all my wins loss fans out there. Even though it's a stupid stat in my opinion. Made 31 starts, threw 170 innings. If you were to ask me, if, like I said, if things continue to go south, I do think Katana's going to be the guy. Would he be the one that I choose? No. Do I think that's what's going to be, though? Yes. And I know your thoughts instantly no. I'm not as against it as you surprisingly might think, but I just think there's better options right now. That's really the thing for me, because the two guys that I would prefer personally, Spencer Turnbull, which I was beating that drum early in the offseason to get him as I want him as the Griffin Canning to this roster. Like, that was the guy that I wanted, where I thought, he could be good in the bullpen, be good in the rotation if you need him to be there, and give you some starts. The only thing that does worry me with Turnbull is that he's another guy that has had injury concerns. So the other guy that I look at who has been relatively healthy over the past 2 seasons is Andrew Keeney, who Carson actually mentioned in the group chat. And I know I just made people want to vomit, but at the end of the day, if the Mets are bringing in another starting pitcher, it's not going to be a guy, at least for right now. Like a deadline, different conversation, but for right now, it's not going to be a guy that everyone's going to be to the moon about and throwing a parade over. I think one of those two guys would be better personally than bringing back Katana. I don't know your thoughts on that, but that's just me.
Well, see, I'm not like completely 100% against bringing in Quintana because if they really need to, then and they desperately need an arm, then sure, bring him in. He's not the worst option out there. There's probably a ton of other starters like that are out there that are 100 times worse than Jose Quintana. But I just for me, I'm kind of like not really forced because I've seen what Quintana can do in a season. Like he's your prototypical five starter, which again is not terrible because every rotation needs a prototypical fifth starter. But he's gonna go out there, he'll give you innings. He'll be so like sure he'll have a couple of good starts here and there, but then we'll also see like last year when he had that atrocious start against the Oakland A's, where that game took like 3.5 hours, 4 hours, and he let JJ Bleday hit a freaking I think it was a go ahead grand slam against him in that game, and they ended up losing that series entirely, and that was just terrible. But yeah, I wouldn't be completely against it. Like I said, if you really need an arm that bad, then sure, why not? And again, another thing, he's shown that he can pitch in New York. So, but I just think there is better options out there. And again, I think a guy like Spencer Turnbull, like you said, I think that would be a really good option. Like again, and like you mentioned, he does have injury concern, but the last 2 seasons he has been pretty good, both with oh sorry, not the last 2 seasons, but last year he had a really good bounce back with the Phillies. And again, you look at his repertoire: four seamer, sweeper. We know David Sturz likes to bring in pitchers who throw sweepers, and then sinker, curve, changeup, slider. So he has a pretty interesting repertoire, and I like it a lot personally. But yeah, that's what, at least for me. I'm not 100% against Quintana. I just think there's better options out there.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to for me. Um, I just think there's better, but either way, yeah, hopefully it doesn't get to that point where they need to go out on the market and sign a guy. But let's segue into the next topic here, which is a little bit it hurts a bit, but it's looking like Jose Iglesias will not return with the New York Mets. And I have conflicted feelings about this because uh for a multitude of reasons. One, there's my heart saying that I want him to return because of the sign that's behind me, and because pointing the wrong way, the sign that's behind me, and because of just everything that he brought to the table last year. And on top of that, in terms of the reasons why I'd want to bring him back, is number one, I want Jeff McNeil gone. It's not going to happen. I've accepted that's not, but I would just prefer Jose Iglesias by a long shot. The other guy I'd prefer him over is Nick Madrigal, who I talked about before off air, but yeah, or and on air. But Nick Madrigal, I have no excitement for him. I think he's completely garbage, to tell you the truth, and I don't view him as anything other than a right-handed Jeff McNeil with less upside than that. The only positive, or the positives, if we're going to get to that, number one, it paves a way for the young guys to take over. So Luis Acuna, it's really up to him to go ahead and take the reins here. Brett Beatty, if he wants to get playing time, he's getting an opportunity here. Ronnie Mauricio, when he's healthy, this is your opportunity, kid. Jet Williams, this is your opportunity. So for all of those four guys there, it paves the way. The other thing that's slightly a positive, slightly maybe not, is that the one fear that I had with bringing back Iglesias is if started to play like garbage, how this, how we'd feel about him compared to how he did last year, and it would ruin the story of Jose Iglesias, if you will. And the there's one more thing I was gonna bring up as well with this that I'm drawing about. Oh yeah, the last thing I was gonna bring up is I think it's time because again, my heart's telling me otherwise, my head's telling me another thing. There's this part of me in my head that's telling me it's time to turn the page, and it was fun for a season, but it's time to turn the page and focus on building a serious winning baseball team, which sure have a few gimmicks here and there, but not be completely gimmick driven. Your thoughts on this though?
I kind of share the same opinion as you. Listen, I personally and emotionally, I would love to bring back Jose Iglesias because the vibes last year, that was probably out of all the teams I root for, and in terms of the runs they had, that was probably the best run in terms of just emotion and vibes that I ever had on a sports team. Like like I get it, like we both love the Rangers, like 2014, 2015, those runs were great, but those teams never had that or even like the 2015 Mets, like those teams were great, but those teams never had the vibes of the 2024 Mets. Because I mean, from everything, like you mentioned with the gimmicks, you got Grimace, Iglesias having the concert on the field after being the Astros, back in June and yeah, back in June. It was just it was great, but I do understand it from the point that look, Iglesias at the end of the day, he's a depth player, and what was I going to say? Team morale and chemistry is important, but I don't think that you want to go out there and overpay for a guy like Jose Iglesias just to be a bench guy and just because of the song OMG. Even though, listen, I love the song OMG. That's a hell of a that's a banger of a song. I can't lie. The first time we listened to it, that just the emotions and the hype was just all over the place. But again, when you look at Iglesias, he's he's an older veteran. He's been around the league for a while. He's played on a lot of different teams. And last year, we do have to look at it. It was a career year for him. And do we think that he could go out there and repeat that same type of year? And maybe I'm not seeing you even repeat the same type of year, but come anything close to it in terms of numbers, that remains to be seen. It just because it worked well for a year doesn't mean it's going to carry over to next year. And look, I don't think that if Iglesias would come back here and he performed bad, I don't think it would dampen 2024 and how we viewed him in 2024 just because that ride was just so fun and special. I don't think for me personally, at least, it wouldn't ruin what we experienced before.
I
But I
don't think it
definitely
would. I want to make it clear. Sorry to cut you off. I don't think it would ruin what we saw before. I just am afraid that it's going to ruin a little bit of how the fan base feels about Iglesias himself. And
okay,
just
yeah.
because of the fact that, he's coming, like, it's more than just the fact that, because for me and you, we'd both look at it like, all right, he'd probably get cut either way. But at the same time, there's going to be that side of the fan base as like, well, fuck him because he took up a roster spot for a while just to suck. But continue.
No, yeah, I get that. And for me, look, something we both preach for in terms of both the Mets and the Rangers, especially the Rangers, you don't want to rely on friendships and stuff. You don't want to make roster moves because of that. And for me, if Iglesias came back and he performed well, I personally wouldn't have any problem just saying, okay, you know what, it didn't work. See you later. It is what it is. I mean, there would be that little side of me that would say like, yeah, it does suck, but my brain and the fact that I'm more looking at more hard, cold results, I'd be like, you know what? It is what it is, Jose. Thank you for everything, but we have to move on and do what's best for our ball club at the end of the day. And David Stearns, he shares that same value because even though he is a Mets fan, he's said multiple times that when you're in that type of position of power as a GM, a president of baseball operations, you can't think emotionally. You got to do what's best for the team at the end of the day. And listen, it would suck to cut him at that point, but like I said, you got to do what's best for the team. I do agree with you that it does now have it clears a path for at least the younger guys to come up here, and you partner that also with Jeff McNeil because listen, if Jeff McNeil wasn't here on this roster and his money wasn't clogging up a big chunk of the payroll, I definitely think Jose Iglesias would have been already here and re-signed at that point. And he could have been a mentor towards Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, Brett Beatty, and guys like that. But obviously we'll see. I mean, the one thing I'm still looking at is, we're deep into the offseason. Spring training is right around the corner. It's going to start. I'm pretty sure the Cubs and Dodgers play actually on a Friday. So spring training begins on Friday. And Iglesias still hasn't signed with the team. And I know he had that sit down with John Heyman, and he did a whole report with him. And of course, because Scott Boras is also Jose Iglesias his agent, so there is that. But the fact that, and it's the same thing with Pete, like he's had offers from other MLB teams, and he hasn't taken them yet. So he's definitely sitting out and waiting for the Mets and hoping that they'll circle back and make him an offer at that point. So we'll see. Even though I don't think he'll be back, I do kind of, I wouldn't like, so I don't think he'll be back, but I wouldn't completely rule it out yet.
Yeah, that's fair. That's completely fair because there is a world too where his market's so down in the dumps to where it's like, you know what, even if I'm playing in Syracuse, I'll come back, which I would hope for that. I think that would be the best case scenario for both parties because heaven forbid the young guys are struggling, you have an extra veteran who could bring what he did last year, hopefully, and you know I not worst case scenario, but just for the other side of it, the young guys are thriving. Then you just have a veteran down in Syracuse. So, um,
I was gonna say one more point also, that really, aside from Lindor, who on this roster can play shortstop? That's the
that's
one
something
big
that does
key.
worry me. Yeah,
That's the one big key about Jose Iglesias, because I know, because I know Acuna could do it, but even still, like what Carson was saying, good friend of the show, like if Jeff McNeil's, and he's gonna start the year out as the starting second baseman, unless like he has some really bad spring training where you cannot start him. Do you want to bring up Luis Angel Acuna up here and just sit here and ride on the bench? I mean, he'll get playing time, but as a young kid, you really want Acuna. If he's not going to be starting at the MLB level, at that point, you want him to go down to AAA and get some more decent playing time. And because like I was saying, like Acuna, he's shown he could play shortstop, and really, other than him, there's no one else. I mean, I think Nick Madrigal is going to be trying to play shortstop at spring training, but that's a position that he hasn't played yet in the major league level. So there is going to be an adjustment to that. So that is the one thing I like about Iglesias, and that's the one key that I would really like if they were to bring him back, is and because we can't forget, the guy has an amazing glove. Even though he might come back and might not repeat the same type of offensive numbers he put up, you put him on the field and you put him and Lindor together up the middle. I mean, that's a fantastic combo in terms of double play combinations and just scooping and making all these plays.
I'm glad you brought that up because I completely forgot to bring that up, even though it's on my mind before we went live here. That yeah, that's the big thing though with Acuna, where because at the end of the day, we have to remember that this is mostly there's a lot more right-handed pitchers in baseball versus left-handed pitchers. And if I had to guess, McNeil is probably going to start against the right-handed pitchers. And if Acuna is only starting against left-handed pitchers, you are screwing his development. You are completely screwing his development, and then it's just a waste of time. The other thing that we do have to, in my opinion, underratedly keep an eye on is Acuna did struggle last year in AAA. So, like, as much as it was fun what he gave in those 14 games last year, we still have to remember that there is a world where he might come back down to earth a little bit. And I do wonder if, he's struggling in spring and none of these young guys are really taking a step forward. Maybe that's when the Mets decide to make the call to Iglesias and say, you know what, let's just bring you back because we need a guy that could play shortstop because that's the biggest thing. Outside of Acuna, there's no one. And unless Jet Williams is taking the spot and really battling, but then it's the same situation. He's not playing every day. So are you going to ruin his development? Jeff McNeil, ruining everything.
Carson was so right.
He was right that the job should have been done in that dugout in 2021. Speaking of reunions, though, the Mets bring back the world famous Drew Smith on a 1-year deal. for 1 million with a club option. I already gave my thoughts in the video. I will reiterate some of those thoughts. Uh, I've said it before. We've all said it before, and I'll say it again. There, it's hard to say that there is any it's hard to say that there's such thing as a bad 1 year deal. And to me, this isn't an exception here with Drew Smith. Uh, Even though I'm not a fan of the guy, I think he is a quadruple A pitcher, if you will. Uh, he's a guy that could be in the mix in August, September, because I don't think he's going to be healthy until then or next season on a very cheap price. It's an option. I'm indifferent.
Yeah, I don't love it and I don't hate it at the same time. I mean, I think, like you said, the cliche of there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal. Well, I mean, there's also the same baseball cliche of you can never have too many arms,
True.
and especially in modern day baseball where pitchers just drop like flies with tons of arm injuries and going and needing Tommy John surgery. So look, I mean, like I said, do I love bringing back Drew Smith? No, but do I hate it? No, I think because the problem with Drew Smith was, especially in the last couple years in 22, 23, and the beginning of 24, Drew Smith was being relied on as one of the top bullpen arms in this bullpen. And that simply doesn't work because Drew Smith's problem is the long ball. And he gives up way too many home runs to be viewed as a top end reliever in any bullpen in Major League Baseball. But if he is one of those depth guys where he's going to start, or because I think won't start the year healthy because he's still recovering. But if he comes back mid-year, he's pitching good in AAA, and the Mets need some arms later down the year because their bullpen might be a little fatigued, or there's an injury to one of those guys. And Drew Smith is one of the lower end guys, similarly to what like Ottavino was last year, or like Stanek when he was struggling, and the Mets viewed him as a bottom tier reliever. I think if you put him in that role, sure, I think you can do well and shelter his appearances. But you know, if the Mets are thinking, and I don't think they're thinking this, but if they think that Drew Smith can come up here and be a high end level arm again in that bullpen, well, then I think they're mistaken, and I think we'll see a lot of blown saves this year, which I don't want to see a lot of blown saves, and you don't want to see a lot of blown saves this year. But yeah, like I said, I'm indifferent. Like, and it's like I was saying, there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal, and you can never have enough arms.
Yeah, like worst case, you could just cut him for, especially for this price point. Like 1 million is honestly nothing compared to what relievers are making these days. But speaking of relievers, I guess sort of because now he's a starting pitcher. Clay Holmes slated to start on Saturday for the Mets' first spring training game, which not really a lot to discuss here. I'm just excited. One, to watch baseball to begin with. Two, you, me, we are both really high on Clay Holmes compared to most people in terms of how this is going to work as a starting pitcher. I'm a little worried based on the film that I've seen with him tipping pitches a little bit. But if they clean that up, I mean, he's going to be disgusting because just looking at least the pitch shape and the movement on his new pitches, the fastball and the changeup, they look filthy. Like it's disgusting what he's throwing. The problem is just simply tipping pitches, and we saw how much that could affect a pitcher because Severino was living proof that tipping pitches was a huge issue. Like he had a 6 ERA or whatever it was because of that. So Clay Holmes, um, I'm excited, and if he could clean that up, which hopefully you'll see that starting Saturday in that spring training game, I'm excited to see how this is going to go with him. And if he's going to let up runs, if he's going to tip pitches, get it out of the way early here in February and March, and we'll all be happy by the end of this thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I mentioned before in previous podcasts, that originally when the Mets did sign Clay Holmes as a starter, I was a little bit skeptical. But after really watching some videos of him pitching last year for the Yankees, and obviously he did have a couple blown saves here and there. You know, some of them weren't entirely his fault because the Yankees defense really did screw him a couple times, and he looked a lot better. Especially in the postseason and later down the year when they swapped him and Luke Weaver in terms of setup role and closer role. And I really like Clay Holmes' base stuff. I really like the slider, the sweeper combo. I thought, especially like I mentioned, when his sinker's on, that thing's almost unhittable. But there is times where he can lose control of that sinker, and then his outings pretty much went out the window after that. But if they could like work with him and really get that sinker under control, and that's a nasty swing and miss pitch, and then I gotta give you credit because you mentioned that Clay Holmes would be introducing a changeup, and that's what he did. And then obviously him with the fastball. So now he's going to be a five pitcher. He's going to have five pitches in his arsenal. So, and yeah, listen, the tipping pitch is a little bit concerning, obviously, because like we were watching some stuff on Twitter, and Isaac Groffman, who does a good job at breaking down, Mets pitchers and all their repertoires. He did mention the fact that, and when you look at the film, that there was a couple stuff that he was showing when he was and it was more so the changeup, because when he was throwing the changeup, he was more kind of tucking in his arm and his body a little bit. So that was the more major sign that he was giving up when he was throwing that changeup. But listen, I think early on in spring training, even though I'm excited to obviously watch him, because Mendy mentioned that he's going to get 3 innings on Saturday, anywhere between 40 to 45 pitches. So I'm excited to watch him. I am expecting a little bit of, up and downs from him in the spring training, just, working out that changeup, working out that fastball, and even then just, really stretching out, because, he's gonna need a lot more stamina, now transitioning to a starting pitcher. And I do think we might see, like I said, some struggles early on in spring training, and maybe some struggles earlier on in the season in terms of fatigue and stuff, just getting used to it. But I do also think with the implementation of a six-man rotation, I do think we won't see as much as much of an effect on terms of that, in terms of the fatigue. But like you said, there will be some growing pains, but overall, I think Clay Holmes, once he figures out that changeup, once he figures out that fastball, and he really cuts back on the signs, I do think that Clay Holmes is going to be a vital. Well, not that I think he needs to, but he also does need to be a vital piece of this rotation going forward.
Yeah, especially with the Montas injury. And I appreciate the credit, but I won't take too much of it just because to me, I simply looked at Michael King. I saw the two pitches he added to his repertoire and said, Clay Holmes, you have to do the same thing. And that's the good thing, though, if he could get work out the kinks of, the arm tucking and the slow. It's a little bit slower, too. I've noticed the delivery on the changeup versus the four seam. So if he could work those out, if there are days where his sinker isn't on, good. Now he has more pitches to rely on the tunnel with that sinker to where he's going to generate a lot more swing and miss stuff. And he's going to, be able to get through those later innings because he has more tools in the toolbox to go ahead and reach into. So I'm excited for it if he could work that out. And I agree with you. It's going to suck that there's going to be kinks that have to be worked out early on with this thing where, it's going to be ugly. I would say maybe even in April during the regular season, it's going to be ugly at points. But I'm very confident that this is going to work. And I was sour on the move when it happened. There's plenty of receipts. There is proof that I was very sour when they made this move. But my entire tone has changed because I just look at what happened with Michael King when he introduced a couple of new pitches. He struggled out of the gate with the Padres. And once, he got into late April, got into May, worked out the kinks a little bit, figured out how to, utilize those pitches better and really tunnel his pitch as well. It changed everything drastically. So I just look at it in that regard. And yeah, they could move him to the bullpen, but it's not going to be a short leash, especially with the Montas injury. I think that you are going to see like the earliest that I could see the Mets moving him into the bullpen is the middle of June. Like that in my opinion is the earliest you could see them go ahead and move into the bullpen because I think they want this to work and they have every reason to believe it's going to work because I truly think it is, but that's just me.
No, they'll definitely give him a longer leash. I mean, listen, unless we're at a point in like early May and he has like a 10 ERA and he can barely get out of the third inning, then yeah, at that point I think they would make the move and put him into the bullpen. But because they committed 3 years to Clay Holmes, and it wasn't big money either, but because, like I said, they committed 3 years. This is one of Stern's, projects that he thinks that there is major upside to Clay Holmes, and like I said, we both agree with him that there is upside. We think that if he can harness everything in terms of the 5 pitches and his whole repertoire, that he could be an effective starting pitcher. Because like you said, we saw it with Michael King, we saw it with Seth Lu on the Royals. You can do it. You can turn solid relievers into really good starting pitchings. And even look like with Clay Holmes, like I don't need Clay Holmes to go out there and have a Cy Young year. Hey, listen, if he does and he wins a Cy Young, I ain't gonna complain about that. But I just need Clay Holmes to go out there and be a solid third guy. If he could do that, I think we would all cheer that signing, and I think we would love it. And like we were saying with the Kings, similarly like what we saw with Mania last year, there was some struggles with Mania earlier in the year, and even and not even like early in the year. I mean, really like May, June, there was still some struggles there with Mania, but he made that one adjustment with in terms of the arm slot against when they played the Braves, and he completely turned around the season. And then we brought him back. So listen, like we were saying, you just got to be a little bit. You got to be a little patient with him. Obviously, there is that luxury of if things don't work out, you can move him to the bullpen. But I do really want to give Clay Holmes that chance and let him really work out his kinks and just give him as many opportunities he needs and let him develop into that really good starter that we think he can be.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes starting Saturday. And now let me take this off because we are going to move on to the thing that I am the most excited about with this episode. We are going to get into our lineups here. We are going to put together our lineups ideally for opening day. Obviously, this is under the assumption, knock on wood and everything, that everyone is healthy come opening day. And yeah. So we'll just jump right into it. And I think the first one is a layup of who it is, but
I think the first two are layups, to be honest.
to an extent, because there are people that don't have the guy that I think we both have hitting second. I was gonna do the full name, but I don't think it's gonna fit. But there are people that don't have the guy that we're gonna have hitting second. So we're both in agreement, obviously, that Lindor is going to lead off. Um, got that in the way. The other thing, this is what I hate about doing this. I thought that this would. Hang on, I gotta fix this because the only issue with doing this on Photoshop as we go is if I make a mistake with it on full screen, it's a little bit difficult to fix it.
Yeah,
But
I'll at least explain. And even though I don't think we need much explaining as to why Lindor should be leading off, but
did it
yeah, I
again.
mean, Lindor has shown last year that after starting off slow and Mendy made that adjustment, he really took advantage of moving into that leadoff spot, and he just he just exploded. I mean, had an MVP year, really he helped a lot of the guys, lower down the lineup, because there was a lot of times that you saw Lindor after he took that first out of the game, he would go over to whoever was hitting second at that point, whether it was Nimmo, Vientos, other guys like that, and he would basically explain like, listen, this is what you got to look out for in terms of what he's throwing. So yeah, I think Lindor, it's a no brainer. You got to lead him off. You got to what he's comfortable with, you gotta just leave it right there.
Yeah. After the fact that the Mets had the best record from June on, and part of that was because of Lindor going in the leadoff spot, you at least start him in the leadoff spot. We both have Juan Soto second, and I think that we're in agreement that it's a no-brainer that you put your best hitter in the two hole, and on top of that, he's a guy that could draw walks for the guys behind him in the lineup, and on top of that, he could provide power there. Lindor, who could get on base himself, and all of a sudden, Soto has a lot of RBI opportunities with Lindor also providing a lot of speed on the base paths. To me, this is a no-brainer. I could see the argument for hitting him third, but to me, I think given what he did last year in the two hole, and it's a little different, I guess, because he does have Aaron Judge behind him. I still am very comfortable with putting him in the two hole just because of what we saw last year from him in the two hole.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. you have to put your best two hitters at the top of the lineup. It's just as simple as that, and that's what Lindor and Soto are. They are the Mets' best two hitters. And listen, I think this is going to help Lindor a lot because we've seen the last couple years that Lindor does get off the slow starts, especially last year. I mean, his start last year was just straight out abysmal. Like, if we're just going to be honest with each other. But now I think having Soto there behind him as protection, and you know that when Lindor leads off now, he's going to see a lot more pitches to hit because you know that the power threat and just the on base threat of Juan Soto is right there. So while I don't think Lindor or that he needs to start out and be a 300 hitter out of the bat, but I don't think we'll see any more of him really struggling and being like a 120 hitter in April and late March. I don't think we'll see that. I think we'll see a lot more of respectable numbers from Lindor out of the gate just because he has the protection of Juan Soto right behind them.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, it to me, it just makes the most sense. And what Brian is saying in the chat, the 1-2 spots get the most ABs. It's a no-brainer. Your two hitter is the best hitter in the lineup, 100%. Now moving down the order, this is where it could get a little bit different. I personally have Pete Alonso batting third. Who do you have third?
I kind of went back and forth on this one too because for me it was either Vientos or Pete, and I could see the argument for both, but I ultimately went with Pete at third
Okay,
base.
so we're in agreement for the first three guys in the order. For me, my reasoning for putting Pete Alonso in the three hole is if you're in a spot with this lineup hypothetically where this is your top three, you
What
are
actually?
putting
Actually, no, my bad. Because I remembered wrong. I actually put Vientos third. My bad.
oh, you did put
Yeah, I
Vientos
put
third.
Vientos
Okay.
third. Yeah.
So I'll listen to your reasoning for
No,
that after
well,
with
you could go. Yeah, you could go first because you're already explaining.
yeah, so with Pete Alonso, if you look at the top three of the order, this is the best opportunity for Pete Alonso to take advantage of his power. And if he wants to get a big contract after this year, this is it. Because the two guys in front of you are two of the better, two of the best on base guys in the entire league. And those two could draw walks or they'll just get hits, either or. And I think Pete Alonso's in a spot hitting third where he's going to see a lot more pitches and he could drive in Soto, drive in Lindor. To me, that's really why I went with Alonso third in the order. And I think that if he could bounce back to being a 40 home run guy, this is the perfect spot for him.
Sorry. Okay. For me, I do see the argument with both, and this is why, like for me, I said like I really struggled with both because I wouldn't mind like swapping both for me. I just for me, I would say Vientos just because we've seen what he can do. He had that really good breakout season last year after he got consistent playing time. But I think we do all have to remember that even though he wasn't a rookie last year technically, but it was his first year playing consistently and going off, the sophomore slump is a real thing, and we've all seen it with guys. And I just think that with Vientos, you want to be a little bit careful with him. And for me, like I'm not going out here saying that Vientos is going to struggle next year. I think Vientos is going to have a really good, solid season. But for me, I would put Vientos third in front of a Pete, just because I want to give Vientos that a little bit of protection. Because now there is going to be a book on him. You know, he played a full season or almost a full season because he, of course, wasn't here for the start of the season before. But there is going to be a book on him now. Pitchers obviously have a ton of video on him, and like I said, for me, I really want to avoid him slumping. So I think having that protection behind him with Pete, who's a known power hitter, has shown that he could hit really good at the major league level. I mean, he had that down year last year, but pretty much when you look at all of other Pete's years, he's shown that he's a really good hitter and a really good impactful hitter in this lineup. So for me, that's why I went Vientos at third.
Completely fair. So now I'm gonna do the unpopular thing with my cleanup header. I'm going Brandon Nimmo in the cleanup spot. Who are you picking to clean up?
I mean Pete.
Alonso.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm actually gonna give my reasoning first why I don't have Vientos here because I think that's really more of the question probably that people might have about my lineup. My reasoning is if you put Alonso and Vientos back to back, my biggest fear with that is you have two guys who chase at a lot of pitches, swing and miss, to where you might put yourself in a situation where if Lindor and Soto get on base, it's a little bit easier for pitch. Not entirely easy, don't get me wrong, because Alonso and Vientos will crush any pitch they could get, but they have a little bit more leeway to potentially work their way out of an inning with those two versus if you put Brandon Nimmo behind Alonso, who could draw a walk, could get on base. And if you get any of the power stuff from Brandon Nimmo that you got in the first half last year, I mean, maybe you're seeing a career high for him in RBIs as well. So he's not your prototypical cleanup hitter, and I get that. My reasoning is simply because I want a little bit more of a safety net where if pitchers are going to be forced more to throw to Pete Alonso because Brandon Nimmo could very easily get on base behind Pete Alonso by drawing a walk. Nimmo, though, honestly, was the hardest guy to pick of where you put him in the lineup, but since he can't lead off because of Lindor, Soto's hitting too. I think 4 makes the most sense. I could also see 3 though for him.
No, that's fair. I mean, for me, for Pete, the reason I went 4, I just that's the cleanup spot, and that's the guy where I feel comfortable, in terms of hitting. Because when you look at his numbers, batting fourth in his career since 2019, when you look at the numbers, uh, while the batting average isn't great, but we know Pete's not really known for batting average, but a 248 batting average, 336 on base, 515 slugging, 851 OPS for a 132 WRC plus. He does hit well when he's in that fourth spot and cleaning up, and when he has now, I get it. Last year he wasn't great, especially in the regular season in terms of those clutch numbers and those big time hits in terms of when guys were in scoring position especially. But I do think because like if you have Lindor, Soto, Vientos, those are 3 guys that you could pretty much rely on to consistently be on base. And I get what you brought up at the point that you don't want to have Vientos, or ideally you wouldn't have Vientos and Alonso back to back because of that chase factor and that swing and miss factor. But I look at it like this: if you have like let's say like Lindor, Soto, or Vientos like base loaded or second and third anytime, like pitchers might very well try to get Pete to fish, but that requires you to throw, a low slider, a low curveball in the dirt. And if you have like Lindor or Soto who have decent amount of, or maybe not Soto, but Soto's not slow, but he has a decent amount of speed, and we know Lindor is particularly quick. So if you have pitchers trying to, get Alonso to fish low in the zone, and they're throwing sliders, curveballs low in the zone, there might very well be a chance where, there could be a pass ball or a wild pitch, and then you have a run coming in like that, or possibly 2 runs, depending on how much the ball gets away. And like I said, the numbers back it up. I think for me, I like Pete in that 4 slot behind those 3 guys. And we'll get to the fact, but I also think that who I have at 5th is pretty good protection for where Pete's going to be in the lineup.
So I have a feeling that we have Nemo here, but
Yeah.
I have Vientos here. I forgot to put his position there, but um my reasoning for Mark Vientos here is simply because I want him, see, I did it again here, but I want him to be in a spot where there's less pressure on him. And I think that is hitting 5th versus the top of the order. I love Mark Vientos, but for the start of the season, at the very least, this is strictly for our opening day lineups. I want to see Mark Vientos prove that he could do what he did last year in this spot before I am ready to move him up the lineup. Because if so, then I probably want him hitting cleanup or hitting 3rd in the order. But for right now, I want to give him a little less pressure and let the guys in front of him do the damage and get on base. And then Vientos will be in a spot still where he could do a lot of damage. Where, if it goes 1-2-3, like say Lindor, Soto, Alonso go down 1-2-3 in the first inning, you have Brandon Nimmo that leads off the inning, can get on base, and then Mark Vientos is in a spot to do what he did last year in the 2-hole. So that's where I view it with Mark Vientos. But your reasoning for Nimmo 5th, I'm assuming, is similar for why I had him hitting behind Alonso.
Yeah, I just think for me, like when you look at Nimmo and where he is in his career, I think he's a really solid bat. You know, he's not a guy where you want to bat him lower in the lineup just because I think he's too valuable of a bat, especially when he's really on his game. Last year we saw in the first half, Nimmo was a really impactful bat, and then we saw towards the end of the year where he had those couple of injuries, and especially later on in the year he really struggled. But I think, like I said, Nimmo's not a guy that you want to bury down in the lineup, but I also don't think that he's that guy anymore where you could put him at the top of the lineup just because, like what we said, Lindor, he's obviously the leadoff hitter. You're not going to move him from there. And pretty much, I mean, like what we've seen from Nimmo, especially in his entire career of being up here in the major leagues, Nimmo, while he did lead off for a little bit, he's never really been that prototypical leadoff hitter because while he was hitting for average, your leadoff guy is someone that you want to get on base and steal bases. Nimmo, while he has good speed, he was never really a guy that stole a lot of bases. And, especially, especially a couple years ago when they made the bags a little bit bigger, you thought maybe you'd see Nimmo, steal a little bit more, and I think he did, but still not at the rate that you want as for a leadoff hitter. But I think if you just plug Nimmo in fifth, right in the middle of the order, I think he's an impactful bat where he could really do some damage in that lineup, and I think he's really good protection for Pete.
Yeah, so a lot of the similar reasons, just things shifted around. Six, I think we're both gonna agree on that. This is where the you put the platoon situation here of Winker and Marte, which this is gonna go a
No,
little bit.
I actually disagree. I went
Oh, you
Alvarez
actually
here. I
you
went
went
Al
over. Okay,
I went Alvarez.
that's interesting. Okay, so um, I'm just gonna delete where that is, but my reasoning for Winker and Marte, and this is more so the fact that Winker's going to get more of the at bats because of what we mentioned before, where it's going to be predominantly um, right-handed pitchers pitching, and that's going to put Winker in the spot to be here. My reasoning is similar for why I have Nimmo hitting behind Alonso. It's why I have Winker hitting behind Vientos, a guy that could draw a walk, get on base. If Mark Vientos is going to be in a spot then where he's going to see a little bit more because the pitcher's going to know, all right, Jesse Winker's a guy that could get on base, right behind him. That's my reasoning. I really don't have anything other than that. It's just a little bit of a safety net for Vientos.
All right, I agree. Well, at least I agree with your reasoning. For me, I went Alvarez at six, just because for me, listen, we've all seen the highs and lows of Francisco Alvarez in a short time of being a major leaguer with the Mets. We've seen him at his highs when he's just barreling up balls and just nuking pitch after pitch after pitch. But we've also seen his struggles where, especially earlier in the postseason and stretches of last year, where he looks lost at the plate and he's struggling to adapt to that low outside curveball or slider, and he's just swinging and missing everything. And you're like, bro, like, come on, man, like seriously, like we expect a lot better from you. But for me, this is a big year for Alvarez. And even though he's still a young kid, I mean, he's still only 23 years old, or at least this is going to be his 23-year-old year. I think it's time that we give Alvarez a little more responsibility here. And I just want to give him a bit more bigger at bats. So for me, that's why I have Alvarez at six. And listen, if he struggles in the six hole, you can always move him down. But for me, at least for the start of the year, I want to give him those opportunities to be in those big time RBI situations. So that's why I went Alvarez six.
I'll say this: if it was to go the way of your lineup, like for the top five, I would want Alvarez hitting sixth also because then I'm assuming you'd have Winker seventh, and I think it would make sense to have Winker hitting behind Alvarez then at that point. So if that's your reasoning, then I completely agree with that part where I think that would make the most sense with how your lineup is constructed. But for me, this is where I have Francisco Alvarez hitting seventh. Uh who do you have hitting seventh
Winker.
before I get my reasoning? Yeah. I had a feeling, but just had to make sure there. But with Francisco Alvarez hitting seventh, if the guys in front get on, he's a guy that could do damage. And if he starts to produce, he's a guy that can move up the order. Like you said, this is really the make it or break it year in terms of, to an extent, of what Alvarez will be, because obviously there's more room for growth with how young he is to begin with. But I think you really want to see a step forward this year, and I think 7 is a good spot because he was hitting ninth a lot last year, hitting eighth even a lot last year, especially late in the season come playoff time. I think it's time to move him up a little bit in the order, like you mentioned, but I don't want him getting too much of a responsibility off the rip. I'd like to see him prove that he could, earn, because like we talk about with hockey, you got to earn your ice time. I'd like to see him earn his spot in the top of the order. And that was kind of my thought with Vientos too, where he did earn it last year, but I want to see him do it again.
No, that's fair. For me, Winker at 7, for me, I like him at 7. I think, if the Mets start a game, and they're hitless the first 2 innings, I think Jesse Winker is a guy, especially with his tool set of, even though like I think Winker can hit for power, but in a short time of being a Met last year, he really never showed that power gene. I mean, he had a couple of nice home runs. I mean, we talk about Game 3 against the Phillies, that walk off home against the Orioles. So he can hit for power, but it's not really his thing. His thing is more contact hitter, you know, good eye and just getting on base. And I think, like I said, if the Mets start a game and the first 6 hitters go down in order, I think start of the third inning. I think Winker is that guy that could really start a rally together. Like I mentioned, with his very good eye, with his ability to get on base, I think Winker, gets on. Also has some speed. He could steal a base if he really has to. And overall, I mean, he's a really solid bat, which and I mean, every team, needs this, like a really solid, reliable bat that you really have at, in terms of, the 7 hole or 8 hole. So for me, that's what I have Winker at 7.
Yeah, I would agree. If, like I said before, if the lineup was structured this way, like I wouldn't be mad about it either. 8, let's. Oh, sorry, mistyping. It's the great Jeff McNeil. Who do you have?
McNeil.
Do I really have to say anything good about him? Like, I'm moving on. If you want to say anything, you can. I'm not saying anything. I've accepted he's here. He's the second baseman. I'll move on from this.
Yeah, Carson. Yeah, I don't think there is much to say about McNeil here. I mean, you would hope that maybe him being lower down the lineup, you could maybe see some sort of renaissance of something close to what we saw in 2022, 2019. Even though I think that McNeil is just completely gone because I think pitchers now have the book on him. And yeah, I mean, look, we need an 8 hitter in this lineup, so I guess McNeil fits.
We need somebody to play second base is what it
Yeah, we
comes
need
down
someone to
to.
play.
And it sucks that if Acuna takes the reins, then it would be great. And I love that Carson though joins in when we're talking about McNeil. It's like truly poetry here. Yeah, he has a new bat and changed his swing. Yeah, and he showed power in the second half last year.
Hey, listen, remember what was it, game 4 against the Dodgers where he took that ball to the warning track? He's making progress, making progress.
Yeah, he's just give him time. He's misunderstood. At least we got some aura though
Yes.
at the very bottom of the lineup here with Jose Siri for both of us. Obviously, unless Tyrone Taylor's playing, but Jose Siri hitting ninth. I don't think there's a lot to that needs to be explained here. Um, he's the last guy left. He's going to get the most of the reps at center field. He's better than Taylor defensively. He's going to swing at a lot of garbage. It is going to be ugly. But when he does make contact, he's probably hitting a home run, which is the good news about him. And either that or he's going to be pimping a double at the wall. So there's no in between. But yeah, I don't know if you want to just say anything about Siri. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's the last spot in the lineup. It's not like there's really a choice here.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same thing like with you said about Siri. I mean, he's our aura king. You always need an aura king at the bottom of the order. Last year we had it with Harrison LeBader. We didn't bring him back. Good luck to him. Good luck to him signing with the Minnesota Twins. But I think Jose Siri is the perfect guy to go 9, or Tyrone Taylor, whoever you want to go there. But Siri is going to play some solid Gold Glove defense out in center. And like you said, he's going to swing a lot of garbage. But you know what? As the 9 hitter, I don't need you to provide a ton of offense, but at least if you're gonna be down there, have some major power and be able to pimp some nukes. And I just think that's what Jose Siri is, and that's what I think he could provide, and I think he'll be a nice solid piece to round up that lineup. And
Oh,
also he's got some speed. So if he gets on base, he could steal a base, and then you got the order reswitched, and then you got Lindor up.
yeah, the quote unquote double lead off, if you will.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wish I could bring Carson's comment up. It's too funny, but um, like I was saying, yeah, I mean the quote unquote double lead off there. If Siri does get on, has a stolen base threat, and then if Lindor gets on, you got two guys that could steal bags. So either way, I like where this lineup is shaping up. Either lineup, for me would be, I'd be more than okay with either. But yeah, everyone in the chat, comments on replay, let us know your thoughts on the lineups. Who's you like more? Do you hate both of ours and think that there should be a completely different lineup? Let us know, and I'm sure you will, because the comments love to tell us when we are wrong.
Unpopular take, but this is for Carson. I think Jeff McNeil should lead off. That's just me.
Yeah, get Jeff McNeil leading off, and we'll make it up to him with putting Jose Siri in the 2-hole.
Yes.
Then we're truly winning. Actually, no, we got to get Nick Madrigal on the top of the order for Carson.
Oh, yeah.
Get both of them in the lineup.
And Marte.
Yeah, just got to stack all of them at the top of the lineup. But yeah, well, let me see if there's anything else in the chat that. Yeah, I mean, this is what we'll do. Yeah, Torrent's third.
We'll win the World Series like that. We're good.
Yeah. At least we have some aura out of our 2-hole there. Pause. But I think that's really all that we have to get into, honestly. Saturday, the games start up again, spring training. So we'll at least have something to cover other than guys doing cute little TikToks and Instagrams walking into the facility, babysitting the admin's child and all this other crap, what their favorite candy is, going to the candy store, whatever the fuck they're doing. No more of that. It will be actual games that we could talk about. And it's so much nicer having the shorter off season. I could definitely say that, because we'd be screwed if the off season was any longer than it already was. But do you have anything to say before we wrap up the episode?
No, I'm ready to go. Saturday, it's going to be hype. Like we said, Clay Holmes on the mound. Hopefully, I wonder who's going to start the first game, or not in terms of starter wise, but at least who's going to be in the lineup. I would love to see Soto make his unofficial Met debut in spring training, but we'll see. I mean, there's plenty of games we'll see plenty of Juan Soto content in spring training, and we saw the Soto shuffle today during live BP, but seeing it the first time like in live games, that's going to hit different.
Oh, I've never, like we've been saying, so excited to watch a man grab his crotch. Like, this is the most excited I've been. Outside maybe if Jose Siri does it. And who will probably be in the lineup? Carson's favorite Mets prospect, Jet Williams, will probably be in the lineup.
Leading off at center field.
In center field, yeah. Carson's wet dream, a short guy playing center field.
Listen, I got it. We know what the outfield is. We have McNeil in left field, Chet Williams in center field, and Marte in right.
We're winning the World Series,
We're winning the World Series.
That's going to be it for us. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live, and we'll see you guys in the next one.